eternal, and the issue can hardly be changed by any governmental action. Back to Dr. King's wise words, we must learn to have understanding. Removing any monument, costly as it would be, is not effective and will unlikely bring about anyone's change or any personal group's change. I think it should remain where it is.
Thank you. Jeff Hargis? No. I don't get it.
All right, my name is Jeff Harris. I have lived in Shreveport all of my life. I am a local cook, though that is not particularly important, I feel. I would like to say first and foremost that I really do not have an opinion as to whether or not the monument should be moved, but I have a lot of concern over the incredibly divisive and disingenuous rhetoric that I have heard from both sides of the debate, not in here tonight per se, but in the country as a whole, specifically New Orleans. The concept that a set of statues is even in the top 10 problems of what is wrong with New Orleans, to me, is a little bit absurd. But at the same time, I have never really understood, I guess, why it could be considered completely appropriate to display Confederate monuments in the way that they are across the South. But I just think that it is, in a lot of ways, really unfortunate that a war that ended so long ago is still dividing Americans, especially when that war was really about dividing Americans. And I think that we are offered a unique opportunity with this debate to be honest with each other about the true history, to not sugarcoat it, not use it for divisive politics, not use it to bolster your own rhetoric, but to teach it for what it was, which was a very complex, trying, tragic, difficult time in American history. And that's about all I have to say, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Ryan Hauser? Probably really small.
I want to thank y'all for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm all for keeping the monument.
The vote?
If you want to write on the slip what you, just because you can't come up, is absolutely fine. Sorry.
I'm all for keeping the monument. I have great ties with that monument from Shreveport. Not only did I have ancestors that fought under that flag, I also had ancestors that fought under the American flag. Somebody once asked me, what was the difference between the North and the South? And I asked them that rather, and my answer was, we're all Americans. Blood was shed for both flags. In 1952, my grandfather took great pride when times were tough. My dad was 7 years old. He was 74 now. He built the fence around that monument to protect us. I vote we keep it, and I hope it stays.
I'm David Wells. I'm a retired school teacher, born and raised in Shreveport. Taught 15 years in Orleans Parish, 27 years in Caddo Parish. I'm in favor of removing the monument and putting it somewhere on private property. My stance on this comes from my study of the Confederacy and what it did to our country. Without the Confederacy, there would have been no Civil War. The Confederates, you read what they said about slavery, what they said about secession, it's very clear that they believed that white supremacy was the cornerstone of their movement. They seceded from the Union after the election of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, my favorite president. My students have often wanted to know, did I know Abraham Lincoln personally? I did go to school here in the early 60s, but that's the 1960s. The Confederates believed that Lincoln would abolish slavery, and that's why they seceded from the Union. Secession, under the United States Constitution, is illegal. It is unconstitutional. The Confederates raised armies. They fought against the United States. The four men whose busts are on the monument were all slave owners. Three of them were educated at West Point. Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, Pierre Beauregard, all were educated at West Point, which is the United States Military Academy. Then they used their training and their military expertise to make war against the United States. The Confederates did not believe in the United States. They believed in the disunited States. Civil War was the worst thing that ever happened to this country, the worst thing that ever happened to our state, the worst thing that ever happened to our region. I don't believe that we should continue to honor the Confederacy as a movement, as the most divisive movement ever in the history of our country. Secession was debated in those days. Secession was debated at the Secession Convention in Louisiana. There was a man named Taliaferro who expressed his view, which was very common, that secession was illegal under the United States Constitution. Secession has been settled by the Civil War and also by the Supreme Court. Many Americans are unaware that the Supreme Court ruled in 1869, Texas versus White, that secession is unconstitutional, that the Union of the States is indissoluble, indestructible, and perpetual. People could have paid more attention to Abraham Lincoln's first inaugural address to understand that.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Your time has expired. And if you do have written comments you want to enter into the record, we can give those to the secretary.
We're both architects. I don't know if that means anything, but I'm going to give you a little bit about myself. My name is Michael Mason. I'm an architect, and I was educated at Tulane. I think what happened in New Orleans this last few weeks has been pretty terrible. To demolish history is really one of the things that this country shouldn't do. We're all of different colors and of different backgrounds, and we're all free at this point. And I agree with the fact that, these statues should be construed as the end of slavery, the end of the Confederacy, and the death of 600,000 Confederate soldiers. And that's what is the basis of that statute. The removal of history is the beginning of a suppression of the mind of where you came from, and the expansion of ideals taught in the Northeast and in Berkeley, which are dampening the spirit of this country. And we're keeping the statute because it's important to remember history for every color to look at and say, what happened? If you don't have it, then what do you have? Well, actually, I think that we ought to gather up those statues that Landers got on the auction block and gather them up and bring them up along the Clyde Fan Parkway and make a new Confederate Memorial Parkway. Bring all those statues up and place them about, some yards apart. You can interspace them with statues about slaves and what they went through in the horrible process of slavery. So I think that it's important that we keep our history, but it's for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, has varying opinions. It is disrespectful for us to continue to do that after people are speaking, regardless of whether they're on your side or not. This will be my last warning, asking you to not do that. Moving on. Next speaker, Michael Mason. Sorry. And to Carrot? Sorry about that,
That's
sir.
okay. I'll tell everyone who I am.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, that's Andrew McKevitt. I always write the V, it looks like an R. Hi everyone, I'm a historian. I'm a real live living historian. I came with a couple of my colleagues from Louisiana Tech. We're actual historians. We're the aforementioned people with PhDs in history. So we have some expertise in this very question. And as a resident of Shreveport, I'm happy to hear my other fellow Shreveportians, my other fellow citizens of Shreveport talk about history and want to preserve history, and I'm so happy to hear that. History, though, is a little messier than just saying a statue is history, and we want to preserve history by keeping that statue there. The statue, in fact, if you think about the history of the construction of Civil War monuments, is not history, it's a distortion of history. It was built in an era, 1906, right? It goes up in 1906. It's built in an era in which white Southerners are rewriting history. Somebody mentioned revisionist history before. The greatest moment of revisionist history in the entire history of the United States is when white Southerners rewrite their own history in the late 19th and early 20th century to remove central elements of the motivation for secession, the most obvious being slavery. So we have a monument that sits downtown that is a monument to the South, to the Confederacy, to the Civil War, that doesn't mention slavery. That doesn't mention the fact that all of the secession documents coming out of each of the 11 states that seceded mention slavery. In fact, most of them spent most of their time talking about slavery. Read the secession documents from Louisiana, from South Carolina. Slavery is our king. Slavery today, slavery tomorrow, slavery forever, as the South Carolinians put it. So I think it's great we're talking about history, and I want us to continue to preserve history, but let's be honest about that history, and let's be honest about what the intention of that monument was. It wasn't about remembering anyone from the Civil War. It was 1906. Most of those guys were dead. It was about making a statement at that particular moment and rewriting history in 1906 and saying, we had a lost cause that was a great opportunity for us to proclaim our independence and liberty, and none of that was true. It was about protecting the institution of slavery. That's the historical consensus. I know you have opinions about the Civil War, and you're entitled to them, but when it comes to actual practicing professional historians, they don't have any doubts about what the Civil War was about. So I just encourage you as we continue talking about history, and I think this is great, and I'm so happy to see many of you wanting to preserve history. Let's be honest about that history. And we can also be honest about that history at that moment in the early 20th century and talk more about what Shreveport was like at that moment. Most of you probably don't realize that the second deadliest place in the entire United States during the era of Jim Crow was Caddo Parish. So that's part of our history. Think about that too.
Malik Stewart. I like that idea. Good job. You can, never mind. No, don't do it. Robert Shales. That's what.
All right, I'd like to thank you for having this meeting tonight. And since my time is limited, I'm not going to miss any words. Let me start off with saying that my albino friends, there's many ways to look at history, and what I want to speak on is not whether or not any monument is of historical value or importance. They all are. Racism is a farce and it's perpetrated by permanent African albinos. For those white people in this room that don't know, you're actually Africans, but you're non-melanated Africans. So that's translated as race stuff. And you are, if you look up your DNA history and stuff, you will find out that you're an admixture of African and Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon. Okay, so this is your historical thing. You're Africans. Stop playing games with us and stop playing white superiority in these other games. Race doesn't exist. We're all the same people. You're non-melanated. Okay, let's move on. Whites, so-called whites are known, are the most violent people on the planet. 2 nuclear bombs proved that over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. As it comes to the point and stuff where we have to end the violence totally and forever. There's a There's a foundation of my point about the Shreveport Monument. It's not on land donated by any daughters of the Confederacy. I went to the courthouse today and asked if there's a deed in the Court of Records. No deed exists. I was given a phone number of another guy to call about this. I don't have his name right here in front of me, but there's no deed, okay? The monument is on public property, okay? There seems to be a point about the Confederate flag which ties it to the monument. The Confederate flag wasn't brought out of the mothballs until African people wanted civil rights, and then the Confederate battle flag, which is also known as the naval jack, was brought out. There's a second flag called the national flag, and if you guys were interested in really the national part of it rather than the battle part of it, I think that you would have adopted and flown the national flag rather than the battle jack. The interesting rub about the Confederate flag and the monument downtown was the black janitor had to go out every morning and put this battle flag up, and every afternoon take the battle flag down, okay? This was an insult and rub to this individual who I asked personally, how does he feel about it? He said, it's my job, I have to do it. Okay, so if you guys were whites here, albinos, if you were interested in the noble monument, you would have had your proud color guard to come out every morning to put that flag up and take it down. However, you had the black janitor. I'm speaking as a part of Lakeside, Allendale.
Right.
That gives me 5 minutes.
No.
Okay, Allendale, by the way, was named after General Allen. His bust is down on okay, thank you.
Hey, can you
There are many more points and stuff to make.
Can you make
Robert
a clarification
Shale?
about the deed, and if it is on private
Sir,
property?
you're out of order.
There's no
Robert
deed, there's
Shale.
nothing on file.
Thank you, Mr. Shea.
I'd like to thank you guys for letting me come here and talk. Thank you, brother. I've always considered myself from Africa. We all are. But I've been white all my life. And I'm not as educated as some of the folks here. And I thought about all last night what I was going to say. And I'm not a public speaker. But I understand my white brothers and sisters and their feelings about this war and about that monument. I grew up in the South, and when I was a little boy, I think everybody in my school had a rebel hat and a rebel flag, and we redid Pickett's charge and all that, but that was back in the 60s and times have changed. We've changed as a people. Now, I can't even fathom what it would be like to be black and to live in this country. I can't even fathom it. I tried to imagine it maybe. One thing I was imagining when I was thinking about talking, I have sons and daughter, and I wondered what I would tell them if I was black, and we had to walk by Johnny Reb every time we went in the courthouse for this parish. How would I explain that to them? How would I tell them that those 4 men up there used a strap on our ancestors? That those men up there fought to keep our ancestors in chains. That's what I would like to know. How would I explain that? And how would that make me feel? And I can't imagine that would make me feel very well. Now, I'm not for doing away with that statue. That statue's part of history. But we need to take that statue somewhere other than where it's at right now. Where people can come who do believe in the South and do believe that those soldiers died for what they believed in. Let's put that somewhere where people can go and pay tribute to those people. But let's take it away from the place where we go for justice in this country. Let's take that away from there so that people don't have to explain to their children what this heritage is. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat Dice.
My name is Pat Dice. Should I? What? Oh, my name is Pat Dice, and I'm for keeping the monument where it is. If it offends anybody, you know, it's been there a long time, and a lot of people have not been offended. All four of my great-grandfathers fought in the Civil War. We lost a lot of people. And my grandfathers had slaves, and not a one of them treated them bad. I don't care if you believe me or not, it doesn't matter to me. But I do know, I have been told through history.
Treated them bad. Treated them bad.
They all stayed with my, you know, with the family that they were with, and they were given what they needed. So, thank you. I'm for keeping the monument where it is. I'm sorry that those in New Orleans were taken down. Thank you.
Danny Hayes.
I'm Danny Hayes. I was born and raised in Shreveport, lived here all my life. I love that flag. I love that flag. I served in the Army. I've been trying to win the lottery for the last 30-something years, 20 years. The only lottery I won was the draft lottery. I was drafted. I was one of the last ones in Shreveport to be drafted. I was honored to do what my part, you know. I was unwilling at first, you know, but I served my country. That's history to me. That's history. That's history. That Confederate monument's history. I graduated from Sunset Acres, Oak Terrace, Woodlawn. I went to LSUS for a couple of years. I ended up being a truck driver for 30 years. I delivered General Motors products, American made. I'm from America. And this to me, you know, it's like this young lady on this roll here got this flag wrapped around her, you know. To me, that's disrespectful, you know. You wouldn't catch me wrapped around dragging that flag. This monument means something to me too, you know. I mean, when I was 6 years old, I was at Sunset Acres. We went on a field trip. Where did we go? To the courthouse, Caddo Parish Courthouse. I got to see the monument. I got to see the courthouse. I was amazed. At 6 years old. 60 years later now, it's not discriminative to me. It's not against the blacks. It's not against somebody that didn't fight in the Confederate War. It's history. It's history. All this is about history. It's the past. I just wish everybody could get over it, leave the monument where it's at, and let's just move on. But right here and now, I want to make a motion. If it is moved, I'll make a motion to move it to my backyard. I'll take care of it. I'll pay to have it moved. Thank you.
Great students. Please make your way towards the front.
Hello, my name is Rich Dukes. I'm in favor of keeping the monument where it is. This monument hasn't hurt nobody for the years that it's been there. It ain't hurting nobody now. What we've seen happen down in New Orleans is a disgrace and it is appalling. What you see happen down there, destroying history, is the same exact thing you're seeing right now in the Middle East, where ISIS is tearing down statues and throwing them on the ground, blowing up Buddhist monuments. If you don't believe me, all you got to do is start researching it and you'll see it. Doing this here is appalling. And it should never happen on American soil, period. That monument was put there for our ancestors who fought in the Civil War. I had over 300 of my family members who fought on the Confederacy side, over 140 that fought on the Union side. A lot of them are buried in mass graves who I don't know where they are. But that monument stands for them. So removing it is wrong. And it needs to stay right where it is. This is a very touchy subject. But the deal is, you cannot change history. You start tearing history down, you're deemed to repeat. And nobody wants to go through another civil war in this country because of the hard works in the person. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Keith Kraft. Keith, Mr. Kraft, you're going after Ms. McPherson. Ms. Barnum.
I'm Pamela McPherson. I believe the statue should be moved. Symbols of the Confederacy have no place near a court of justice. Confederate symbols do not represent justice. They represent the denial of justice. Confederate symbols should be moved from our courthouse grounds.
Thank you. I'd just like to note we appreciate your record. Mr. Kraft.
Thank you. And I'm the only citizen other than Bill Nichols who attended the previous non-public hearings of this group. Start out with the prayer of General Robert E. Lee, 41 words. Help me to be, to think, to act what is right because it is right. Make me truthful, honest, and honorable in all things. Make me intellectually honest for the sake of right and honor, without thought of reward for me. Robert E. Lee. Harry Truman kept it on his desk. Jack Kennedy kept it in the Oval Office. Both Democrats. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in Committee Room C, unless it's been moved, Thomas's House Bill 71 gets a hearing in the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee. Judging by the 9 members, I expect it to go down. Then it'll go to the full Senate and only can come up by an unusual motion and a second and a 2/3 vote, is my understanding from the Senate Council. Then if it passes the Senate, which it will, the governor is expected to veto it. He said as much last Wednesday. Then that thing is dead. Get back to locally. And start in New Orleans and let's move north. UNO did a poll for the historians in the back last week of 1,238 Orleans Parish registered voters, equally representing voter registration by race. And Malik, you can give me some of that melatonin. I need a little. 34% of those in the poll wanted those monuments removed. 84% wanted Liberty Place removed. And the lowest percentage was about 28% for Robert E. Lee. And even 46% of African American Arlenians wanted to keep General Lee up there at Lee Circle, but he's down. I believe that the south side of the courthouse, Bill Wiener would have said that had he stayed, needs a statue of Dr. King. I believe his words. As a 16th birthday present to myself, I memorized the 1,767 words of I Have a Dream. I'm probably the only member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans to have so memorized that speech, but I go where my mind takes me. Keeping it there and adding a statue of Dr. King on Milam, or even on the same side. I understand how you're going into a court and you're the defendant and you're a young black male and you're accused of shooting another young black male in Shreveport. The late Dr. Artis Cash told me when the flag came down at a council meeting, Ken, I wish that would reduce black on black crime even 5%, but I just don't think removing that flag will reduce it. The flag's been down for several years, the crime hasn't abated. If I thought removing this monument would decrease crime in this community by even a smidgen, I might say remove it from the courthouse to somewhere else. The final thing I want to say is this. I wish this kind of crowd would have showed up on April 29th. And my final comment is, this advisory committee will vote, and the commission has the final vote. And my prediction, John and Mario and Mike and Matthew, whoever's out there, if a majority of you 12 votes to remove this monument, don't ever expect to pass another tax in Caddo Parish.
Working? Is it working okay? Okay, I'm here on behalf of my third great granddaddy, who is Simon Pipkin, who is buried in DeSoto Parish, and he was on a burial detail to bury Confederate soldiers who died as a result of their wounds in the Battle of Mansfield. My third great granddaddy is right here. He did not build those trenches to bury those Confederate soldiers for his third granddaughter, with me, to come to Caddo Parish to be aggressively accosted and to be almost violently attacked in front of the Caddo Parish Courthouse when I came there to defend his honor. To defend his honor. My family have been pro-Confederate back in the 1800s when it all happened because they married into it. And I am not ashamed of it. But I am not going to have my ancestors to be disrespected by anybody. And I will go to my grave fighting for that. And I mean it. So the next time I come here down here to Caddo Parish, wearing this flag that the young man had a problem with me wearing, not to mention I am a veteran, served during the Vietnam War period. But I do put things into context. I honor my ancestors, no matter what war they served in. Even my ancestors who served during World War II, when they were discriminated against and they were not serving up under this flag that I got strapped on my shoulders. It was the American flag. What about the Spanish American War veterans? They were discriminated against too, horribly so. So I don't want nobody to use the color of my skin. Do not use the color of my skin as an excuse to take down the Confederate battle flag. Do not use the color of my skin to take down anything Confederate. And that's all I got to say right now, okay?
How are y'all this evening? I'd like to point out these historical facts about the monument and where it sits. The capital of Louisiana was located there from 1863 to 1865. Governors Thomas More and Henry Allen and the legislators met there. Recruits would gather there to disembark for their training camps. It was there where the Third National was lowered for the last time. At this site was the last reunion of the old veterans in 1936. It was there at that spot, not 10 miles down the road somewhere, but there on that spot. All these things occurred. The soldiers, widows, wives, and grandchildren worked for years to raise money for that monument. It was not put there to spite anybody, but to commemorate the courage and the gallantry of the men that fought, most of whom, between 80 and 90%, were non-slaveholders. Many were sharecroppers, many could not read nor write, and not owning property could not vote. They feared for their homes and the safety of their families. The slanderous term traitors are frequently used. The fact is, no Confederate was ever tried or convicted of treason. Jefferson Davis wanted to be tried and spent a couple of years in jail waiting to be tried. Chief Justice Solomon P. Chase, abolitionist and radical Republican, advised the Attorney General not to prosecute Davis, that the court might have to find in his favor. He said the question of secession had never been tried in the courts, that the question had been settled on the battlefield and to leave it there. It wasn't until 1869, 4 years after the war, in Texas versus White, that secession was declared illegal or unconstitutional. And that was over a bond issue. Also, I'd like to point out that 4 ex-Confederate officers served in the U.S. Army during the Spanish-American War in 1898. Major General Matthew C. Butler, Major General Fritz Lee, General Lee's nephew, Brigadier General Thomas Rosser, and Major General Joseph Wheeler. Generals Lee and Wheeler retired from the Army in the early 1900s. You do not put traitors in charge of your army. This monument is a great work of art and is in a very historical place where it belongs. And regardless of whether, how this turns out, I still believe them to be America's greatest generation and America's greatest army. Thank you.
Maurice,
Evening. Maurice Loredan is my name. I'm an attorney. I live in Caddo Parish. I've done so most of my life. And when I went to Caddo Parish, I was east of the river. I got a degree in history from Tulane University, law degree from LSU, Baton Rouge. And I go by the Confederate monument every day or every other day. And I don't think of it as a memorial to the lost fighters in the Civil War. It wasn't put in a place where you would memorialize the dead, which would be a cemetery. And it wasn't put in a place where you would memorialize history, which would have been a battlefield, like, for example, down there at Mansfield. I think it was a monument of victory. Victory over Reconstruction. Victory over the enfranchisement of the black people that were citizens for a while during Reconstruction. Through terrorism, lynchings, cross burnings, and finally through these monuments put in proud places over places of government, they were intimidated back into submission. And I don't like having to walk by there with my clients who are often minorities, and it doesn't belong in a place of justice. I want it removed, put it somewhere where the people can revere it, but not my courthouse. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Young.
Hello, I'm Joe Young. I've been here since 1950. And my family didn't own slaves. It had nothing to do with slavery, but the monument should stay where it is. Because if you forget about history, you're doomed to repeat it. And I've heard that several times. But you've got to be true to what got us here. And what he was talking about ISIS destroying monuments is true. The Christians destroyed the Greek monuments too because they were offended by nudity. And we lost a lot of culture from the Greeks. They destroyed the Egyptian monuments. You know, they disfigured the Sphinx. And it's really sad that people with this day and time, when we should be building I-49 and finishing up 3132, that we can't build, that they want to tear down a monument. I think it's wrong. I think everybody ought to reconsider.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead. You speak.
I'm Brenda Fogg, and I live in Shreveport. I'm originally from South Louisiana. And I knew those statues in New Orleans when I was a child. And I have ancestors that fought for the Confederacy. I also have ancestors that fought in the Revolutionary War, in World War I, World War II, Vietnam. I see a thing happening in our country that I don't approve of. Next, it'll be George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, because they owned slaves. Well, let me tell y'all, I'm European, I'm African, and I'm Arab. I believe the statue should stay. And as a matter of fact, how many of you know that the United States wanted Robert E. Lee to command the Northern forces? And he chose to go with his states because they believed in states' rights. And another thing in history is the main reason for the war, the North was going to put huge tariffs. They kept raising them on the South's products that were going up north. So I am a history major. And the young man that talked with his PhD, were you educated at Berkeley?
Although we don't answer them right now, it should be directed to the chair. Mr. Weston.
Thank you. My name is Johnny Wessler, and I am a tour guide. I give historic tours to media and tourists that come to town. The main thing that people are interested in when they come to Shreveport Bossier, besides food and gambling, are music, Mardi Gras, and Civil War history. We are rich in all of those categories. I like history as much as anybody, but I'm a rank amateur compared to Dr. Joyner and Mr. Prime, and I consider Eric Brock and J. Frank McEnany, the late J. Frank McEnany, good friends. So I want to thank you guys for listening today. Downtown Shreveport is a focal point of all of my tours. It's a postcard, perfect picture of downtown Shreveport with a majestic First Methodist Church in the distance as we come over the Red River Bridge, the Texas Street Bridge. The bridge is named for two great, but less than perfect, former governors of Louisiana, Huey P. Long and O.K. Allen. As we come past Street Square and over the Walk of Stars, I point out the old C&B building on the left. This 10-story skyscraper houses the KWK studios. And on the right is a statue recognizing the oil and gas industry that is so important to our economy. A little further down, we see the Huey Ledbetter statue pointing towards Ledbetter Heights, named for the accomplished but less than perfect singer-songwriter. He stands in front of the Shreveport Memorial Library, formerly the Federal Courthouse and U.S. Post Office. As we continue, we pass the old Woolworths building in the lofts, which used to be the Sears department store and coincidentally the home to the first escalator in town. Then we enter the Arts District, called the West Edge. This area includes Tipitina's, Southern University's Museum of Art, the Robinson Film Center, and Art Space. And just past the First Methodist Church, we see Central Arts Station, the Municipal Auditorium, with the Elvis and James Burton statues in front, the Calanthian Temple, and the Antioch Baptist Church. In the absolute middle of all of these attractions is the Caddo Parish Courthouse, with the Civil War statue in front. It is a beautiful work of art, and it was featured in the Michael Douglas movie filmed here called Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. It is historic and a cultural treasure that any historian and tourism professional understands. The statue is unique and gives our courthouse character like no other city in the world. What it is not a celebration of slavery or an advocacy for unequal rights or unequal justice. I respect others' opinions and realize there are passionate and compassionate feelings from both sides. Still, I feel like the efforts made to move the statue are destructive, short-sighted, and misguided. The debate is not unique. I was representing all of North Louisiana tourism, and Bienville Parish has long had a conflict of whether to recognize a site where Bonnie and Clyde were ambushed and killed by law enforcement. Is that glorifying their crimes, or does it signify justice? I think justice. I don't want to see us take a position that is against our collective interests. I honestly do not believe the statue is the problem. The discord is the unhealthy. Please try to see this issue in a sober, honest, and mature way. Moving the statue from this point will be a mistake that will not be easily undone. The Civil War statue should be left standing to be celebrated and exploited for the benefit of us all from now on.
Thank you, Mr. Weston. Your time has expired. Miles Robert.
Hello, my name is Taha. I believe that the monument should be removed and placed in a museum of its supporters' choosing. Removal of this monument is not a Democratic issue or a Republican issue. It is an American issue. Governor Nikki Haley led a bipartisan effort to remove the Confederate flag from South Carolina state grounds. I just want to read a quote. She said, "These grounds are a place that everybody should feel a part of. What I realize now more than ever is that people were driving by and felt hurt and painful. No one should feel pain. There is a place for that flag. It is not a place that represents all people in South Carolina." In case you did not know, Nikki Haley is a Republican. She currently serves in the Trump administration. Yet she understood that this is not an issue about party or ideology, but of humanity and respect for all Americans. Right now, we are fighting for the soul of Shreveport. And as members of this esteemed committee, it is your job to make sure that we are on the right side of history. As a young person, it is hard not to be frustrated with this city because you push a campaign to develop Shreveport and to appeal to young people so we will stay here. And yet at the same time, you work hard to accommodate hate groups like Daughters of the Confederacy. Once removed, the monument can easily be placed in a museum and preserved there. But as people of color, when we see this monument, we feel unsafe. And when we see the city go to such great lengths to accommodate this monument that is a monument to racism and slavery, it feels like the city does not value us as citizens. As young people, when we see this monument, it makes us question if the city shares our same values and if this is a safe place to raise our children. I hear so many people of my age talking about leaving Shreveport, and that breaks my heart. I really love it here, and I hope to spend my life here. But when I see when young people see our government defending symbols of slavery, we feel that this isn't truly home. So as you are defending a symbol of slavery, please remember that you are driving away our future.
Thank you. Miles Roberts, that we are respecting everybody who's giving their opinion. I apologize, Mr. Roberts. Please continue.
My name is Miles Roberts. I was born and raised in Shreveport, educated in Caddo Parish School System. I want to thank the Commission for these hearings. I've attended all of the four, each of the four, but I waited to talk until this one because it's more important, I think, for someone like me to listen than to talk. And I thought it would be best for me to wait to speak in my own neighborhood. I walked here tonight. By now, we all know that the monument has busts of Generals Allen, Lee, Beauregard, and Jackson at its four corners, as well as a statue of an unnamed soldier at the top. But the figure who interests me most on the monument is Cleo, the mythological daughter of Zeus. Cleo is Greek mythology's muse of history, and she is right in the center of the monument. And it's appropriate, I think, that she's facing inward with her back turned on reality, focusing on her version of history, a history acceptable to the descendants of the Europeans who first worshipped her. The war was not about slavery, she says. It was about states' rights. It was about a way of life. It was about economics. She's deceiving us. Yeah, it was about states' rights, the right of a slave state to continue to hold slaves. Yeah, it was about a way of life which assumed the inferiority, indeed the subhumanity of black people. Yeah, it was about economics. The total financial value of slaves in the South was $3.5 billion, making them the single greatest asset in North America, worth more than all the railroads and manufacturing combined. Cleo's not going to tell you the truth about the cause of the Civil War, any more than she's going to tell you the truth about the daughters of the Confederacy and their ties to the Klan at the time of the monument's construction. She's going to ironically point at the word love on her book in front of her and tell you that we should celebrate the men enshrined around her. Celebrate is a key word. That's what her name means in Greek, after all. And she's going to continue to prevaricate about Caddo Parish. She's not going to tell you that Caddo Parish lynched more black people than any parish or county in the country except one. She's not going to tell you that Caddo Parish right now imprisons more of its population than any place else in the world. She's definitely not going to tell you why. When Cleo was engraved, she held in her hand at the beginning a scroll labeled history. And that scroll has since been broken away from her hands, and rightly so. Cleo does not have history in her hands, God does. And there's only one who's been found worthy to take that scroll and to break its seals. And he was lynched and executed wrongly too. The monument needs to go. Like General Lee and the rest, Cleo has already been defeated, but unlike them, she doesn't know when to give up.
Thank you. Rita Harris. One more time. Ms. Harris will be followed by Carl Barker, Sally Cox, and Crystalline Whitaker.
Hi, my name is Rita Harris. I'm 60 years old. I've lived here all my life. I'm in favor of the monument remaining, but I'm mainly here, and I'm not very eloquent. I didn't prepare any statement. I just want to try to bring some kind of sense of a way for us not to go the route of New Orleans regarding the process that was shoved down the throats of the people down there by a very pandering politician who saw an opportunity to divide neighbors who previously were friendly and accepting of each other. I think there should be some way that we can honor both sides here. I'm in favor of the monument staying. I'm also in favor of a statue of every early civil rights advocate from Shreveport-Bossier. I mean, they're very, I'm sure the historians here can speak on their names. I know some of them just from growing up during the civil rights era in the 60s here. We would hear about them. So I wish, I don't know if y'all realize this, but a lot of people in South Louisiana, they look down their noses at Shreveport in North Louisiana. I think that maybe we can show that that as a community we can come together and not be divided, like the politicians in New Orleans divided them. And that's my main message, my main thing. Let's just try to come together. I don't understand why taking away something that I'm in favor of, it's not going to make everybody feel better. It's going to make at least a lot of people feel badly. So I'm all for celebrating anything, anybody who was important in the civil rights movement in Shreveport, nationally, whatever. But I think we should be more inclusive, and let's try not to take the bait of some of the politicians who want to divide us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Carl Barcroft.
I'm sorry, sir.
My name is Carl Burkhalter, and luckily I didn't go to Louisiana Tech or Tulane. I studied at LSU under good professors. And they're talking about 1906 is the age of the resurgence of white supremacy. That is a lie. The country was dominated by robber barons at that time. 15 times more money was in the North than the South. Black people were worked harder and killed after the war. It got worse. If you listen to the Slave Chronicles, the old people talk about it. They talk about slavery with fondness because they were worked to death and killed and slaughtered in the streets afterwards. In Colfax, in Augusta, in South Carolina, 300 black people were made to work on the railroad. 150 of them died. They were worked to death. That kind of thing did not happen before the war. People put this monument in perspective for 1906, when you have, these people were in great pain. My great-grandmother spent her last year in bed, addicted to morphine, because she had joints that were badly injured from working too hard without enough food in the fields. The doctor said it looked like the slaves from Pompeii. And she grew up as a poor slave cropper and sharecropper, and put her nickels and dimes in the UDC to honor her forefathers, because that's the only pride she had left. She wanted me to know, by telling me to read Mark Twain's Pen Wormed in Hell, what had really happened. And that's a good book, but you ought to go to The Age of Betrayal by Jack Beatty and look at the truth about 1906. These people were trying to challenge the North, the Washington, yes, but it wasn't to re-establish any white supremacy. It was about the local rule. And Miss Arlene and I have talked. Her story and mine are very, my grandmother's are very similar. The Yankees destroyed everything, and they had nothing, and they were very poor, and then they had to struggle back. Now, she comes from the mixed race people of the time, who owned a lot of slaves. And I would bet you 3/4 of the people in this room, if you had family at that time, you're descended from them, black and white. Check your DNA, I'm sure, I know what I'm talking about. I've actually looked at the records. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Cox. Ms. Cox again will be fine.
I'm Sally Cox, and I'm here tonight because I love Shreveport and I love Caddo Parish. And I believe that we can find a solution to the question about what to do with the Confederate Memorial statue. Our city can be an example, a positive example to other cities in the country. There have been suggestions that a statue can be built that honors men and women who served during the Civil War and were African Americans. I can envision a comparable statue being placed on the Milam Street entrance to the Caddo Parish Courthouse, and some examples of some African American leaders who could represent the service to our country are Frederick Douglass and his sons, Harriet Tubman, who helped get the slaves to safety through the Underground Railroad, Mary Bowser, who was a Union spy, and I have a list of 25 African-American Medal of Honor winners that could be considered for such a monument, and I'm sure there are many others that might be considered. And I know a decision that who would be placed on that monument would not be an easy one. So the commission might ask a professor from Southern in Shreveport to help the community research and recommend some African American individuals that could be placed on this monument. Shreveport and Caddo Parish have an opportunity to show the state and our nation that we value contributions by all who served during the war, and that the war that nearly tore our country apart. Americans have a right to honor our leaders from both sides of the conflict. Won't you join in a peaceful and honorable solution for a real problem? Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Whitaker. Commentary. We'll accept that without objection, so ordered.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so very much for calling this. A little about myself. I am also a high school teacher. Mr. Wells was my beloved junior year history teacher, so it's really great to hear from him. Thank you for bringing this to the citizens. Whether the monument is taken down or allowed to stay, this moment in history has done us some good. It has united parties that rarely ever come together to talk about anything. And it's also given us time to address the centuries-old white elephant. Yes, please don't believe that this is a new issue that we have. Unfortunately, there seems to be little retention, as there are still people unduly calling their neighbors hateful and aspiring to sanitize history as if we haven't had a series of meetings to debunk such thoughts. So we cannot, as much as we cannot rewrite history, we can also not romanticize history. We cannot take away the definitions of things that were established before we inherited them. So we cannot think that history is synonymous with statues, for history is much larger than that. And if we do not continue, if we don't change the way we think about history, if we keep thinking that it's statues, then we are omitting history that the statues purposely omit as well. So, how can we do this? We cannot continue by flagrantly throwing words around like honest and right whenever they were uttered by people who honestly thought that slavery was right. Let's put this in historical context. The statue was erected in a time when those who were offended by its position had no say. Now the times have changed, and we do have a say. Everyone needs to be heard and respected. Now the issue is not as binary as we have made it to be. We can appease all interested parties. The statue, in its excessive grandeur, can be relocated, not destroyed, and placed in an area designated for Confederate history. And we can keep the literary markers that are around the statue to show the significance of the land that it is on. I have learned, yes, I have listened and learned during these meetings that this area is also significant because this is where the Confederacy forfeited because they realized that fighting was futile at that point. So I believe that it's appropriate to keep some literary markers there to show that. However, this same spot is also where my ancestors forfeited their last breaths, on the very trees that we see adorned with Christmas lights every year. This same spot is also where the Caddo natives forfeited their land, the only land that they knew, and we have nothing to honor either one of those parties. So at the very least, what this can bring about is an incorporation of all who have made an impact on this parish. The Confederacy is neither the alpha nor the omega of Shreveport, Caddo Parish, or the South. Therefore, it is appropriate that we incorporate everyone, especially in a place that is in front of a building of justice for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitaker. Ron,
Stephen Fudge left.
Afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm a native Louisiana. I've been a resident of Shreveport for the past 66 years. I'm a proud retiree of our military forces, 20 years in the Combat Arms Division of the United States Army. I understand honor, I understand monuments and what they mean. It has nothing to do with socialistic issues. It's to honor certain individuals. In the case of military monuments, I honor leaders and all those who fought and died for a cause. Now, within the state of Louisiana, this monument is not about issues that are brought before us. It has nothing to do with social issues. It honors the military that fought during that period of time, including units of free African Americans that fought within Louisiana, the Baton Rouge Guard, the Point Coupee Light Infantry, the Guards of Natchitoches under Augustine and Monet, and also overall under Andrew Jackson, who's pictured on that monument, of the 3,000 free African Americans who fought for Andrew Jackson. Now, we're all born free and pure as snow. What was within our heart is what's learned. We learn respect, self-respect or lack thereof. We earn honor or dishonor. We learn love and hate. And we go through lives carrying this forward, and we place it into things that we want to believe or disbelieve in, such as this monument. And to the attorney who is disenfranchised and weak enough when he walks by a monument in front of the courthouse, I suggest you use the door on the opposite side. There is no monument to anything on that side. There are those in this room today who don't really care about this monument. They're here as paid trills of a greater organization for the destruction of America as it is. We see it in our schools today, to disenfranchise learning, to change history, to destroy the American flag. And with this, to create, this isn't about this monument, it's about social unrest and creating civil disturbance among the masses. These are some of the first steps of overturning and overrunning the country. What's next? Step on our military, step on everyone else. We all need to learn to get along together. We all need to think with the minds our Lord gave us and not with our shoe size. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes.
Good evening. My name is Byron Wilcott. I'm from Shreveport, Louisiana, born and raised. Graduate of Louisiana Tech University. I'm really disappointed that we even have to have a conversation on it. This monument should be removed. The Confederacy seceded from America. They attacked Fort Sumter, which were American soldiers, killed our American soldiers. Afterwards, y'all are putting this monument up. And when I look at that courthouse, if I have to go to the courthouse for any type of business, recently the Confederate flag has been taken down. But when I was younger, I'd go to that courthouse and I'd walk up the steps, and here's this monument to the Confederacy with this flag that was raised, chased my people that had that flag, chased my ancestors, hung them, disenfranchised them, and fought to keep them enslaved, keep them in chains, to keep them from having the liberty that Americans should enjoy. And every time I go into that courthouse, I would see that Confederate flag. And as a black person, as a person of color, you can't really believe that you'll get a fair trial or fair treatment when that flag is flying over a building that's supposed to represent equal justice for all of us, black, white, brown, yellow. I've been blessed to be able to travel and live all over the world. I've worked and lived in Germany. I've worked and lived in Japan. Worked and lived in Mexico. The Japanese flag, white background. The old Japanese flag, flag of the rising sun, white background with the blazing red sun on it. It's a beautiful flag. However, it was changed. It no longer flies there. Because under that regime, the Koreans were oppressed. Under that regime, the Battle of Pearl Harbor was bombed. When we fought World War II and we bombed Hiroshima, Nagasaki, you would think that the Japanese wouldn't like us. But I've lived with them, and they do. Because by doing that, we freed them from a regime of oppression and gave their country, their people, their first taste of true freedom and a democracy. And so the Japanese don't fly that flag anymore because that flag represents all the evil things that they did before World War II and oppressing the Koreans and also bombing Pearl Harbor. In Germany, I visit concentration camps. History, that's history. That's history, and they don't revere those concentration camps. They show that those concentration camps are there to show you what we should do, what we should be allowed to happen.
We appreciate it. The time has expired. Members of the committee, we have exhausted the time that we originally set for the meeting. We have been given permission from the Caddo Parish School Board to stay to hear those additional comments that we need to. If there's no objection from the committee, we will take the remaining speakers we have not heard from for the first time. Just a second.
My name is Shelton Green, and I'm also a veteran, a Vietnam veteran. And first of all, I want to say that I think that this monument should be taken down. The Civil War was fought directly to enslave human beings. It was immoral. It was an immoral war that wanted people to, that gave people right to buy, sell, use in any way, shape, or form a human being. And anybody that says it was done for something else is wrong. By taking it down, history remains. Oppression still goes on. Segregation still goes on. But we have to stand up. We have to fight against those things. We have to fight for unity. We have to fight for bringing people together. And that war, the flag, and you can walk, you know, a lot of people have seen on the news what that flag stood for. You can look at what Dylan Roof did, how he thought about people. So I think that we as human beings should really get rid of this monument, put it somewhere else, and I think it's better for everybody. I think it will not be as divisive. That thing is a divisive monument. It is.
My name is Andy Murphy. I'm the great-great-grandson of Robert Hill Hicks, the 11th Mississippi Company K. Mr. Hicks enlisted in the Confederate Army when he was 16 years old. The 11th Mississippi was involved in just about every major battle fought in the Eastern Theater of the Civil War. It was part of Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. He participated in Pickett's charge. On the morning of the charge, there were 49 men in his company. By sunset, it was only Mr. Hill and one other soldier. The reason why I bring him up is because he is part of my family's history. I am proud of him because of his bravery. I do not know his politics, but But if he went to war to protect the institution of slavery, I would have a big problem with that. I imagine that he went to war because every other young man in his community signed up for the Confederacy and marched off to war. I do believe that when it's all boiled down, the root cause of the Civil War was slavery. Back to Mr. Hicks. He surrendered outside of Appomattox, was paroled, swore an allegiance to the United States, and had his rights of full citizenship reinstated. He would later become the mayor of Greenwood, Mississippi. If Mr. Hicks could accept the end of the war, why can't we? The statue in front of the courthouse is now offensive to a significant part of our population. I would suggest that it be relocated, and I will further go as far as to relocate the statue to the Mansfield Battle Park. In its place, an appropriate historical marker denoting that Shreveport was the last capital of the Confederacy. Our history, for better or for worse, is not being erased. A statue is being relocated. If it helps bring our city together, great. I'd like for y'all to remember a short time ago when the auditorium was a little bit fuller at the very beginning. We all stood up and put our hands over our heart and pledged allegiance to that flag. We're alive and we have allegiance to the stars and stripes, not the stars and bars. And we'll say one other thing, that the people on both sides of this issue, we love this country, we love the national anthem and all the symbols that this country stands for, or that stand for this country. The people who defend the monument are a lot like me, the Colin Kaepernicks of the world, that we can't understand what they see wrong with this country. Granted, this country could be better, but for someone not to stand up for the national anthem, it's an outrage. And I'm here, I respect everybody's opinion here, and I wish all the best. But Shreveport's a great town, and I just think the statue should be relocated down to Mansfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Troy McGee.
Hello, my name is Cooper Gibson. I'm 12 years old from Shreveport, District 9. I believe the monument should be moved to a more appropriate location. A courthouse should be home to fair trials and blind justice. Having people walk past a large monument dedicated to the Confederacy does not allow many people to feel that way. Various declarations of causes from Confederate states make it clear that slavery was a cause of their seceding. I do not think a monument honoring owning people is appropriate in a front of a house of justice. What it is it has attracted extremist people who have led Confederate flags and make threats of violence, guns, and vandalism of African American monuments elsewhere in the city. Leaving monuments where it is condemning their behavior. I think we should move the monument in a Confederate cemetery or museum, which would allow its historical context to be protected from vandalism. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael White, we appreciate you. Thank you. We'll enter the reading records into Mr. Gibson's reading comments into the record without objection. It's so ordered.
My name's Michael White, and I'm not the coach. I am for keeping the monument where it is. It's part of our history, and also is a beautiful piece of work of art. If we move this thing, we'll probably destroy it. This cannot be replaced. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. Some for, some against. Well, I cannot talk like some of these other people have education. I don't have that type of education. But I can tell you, my roots are here. My family was the first ones to settle Louisiana and also Natchitoches. I'm a direct descendant from St. Denis. I mean, direct descent. So, we need to keep this monument where it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Caroline Tate.
This is an impressive group of people here tonight. I've enjoyed listening to all of them. I am Caroline Tate. I am a member of the Daughters of the Confederacy. I'm here today to voice my support for the historic monument which stands in front of the Caddo Parish Courthouse. My Civil War ancestor was a young man that came from Massachusetts who had become a doctor, and he journeyed to Texas to practice medicine. As a surgeon, he was drafted by the Confederacy and found himself in Mississippi taking care of the wounded. He never owned slaves. He never bore arms. He never carried a gun. His brothers were Union soldiers. They were on the other side. After the war was over, soldiers returned to their homes and family, and they were all glad to be home and glad the killing was over and the horror of the war. With the passage of times, groups on both sides of our nation, North and South, decided that they wanted to raise funds to honor those that had fought. It was not a white supremacy thing. They simply wanted to honor those that fought. Little old ladies like myself and their friends got together and scraped up nickels and dimes. This is what paid for this monument out in front of the courthouse. Nobody did it because they were hating someone. Nevertheless, Shreveport is important because of what happened here. The war ended here. Weeks after General Robert E. Lee surrendered, the news finally got here. It was about a month or so later. So this was the last capital of the Confederacy. The flag came down here, and the South was no more. That's history. You can't change it. What's also important and cannot be denied is that the ownership of the Confederate monument and the land on which it stands does not belong to the city of Shreveport, and it does not belong to the parish of Caddo. It belongs to the daughters of the Confederacy. The small piece of land it sits on was given in perpetuity. Perpetuity meaning forever. And that's what it means. You cannot revoke that. There are monuments in Washington, D.C. and in the Union States of America. All of these, all around the nation, were built by little old ladies like me out raising funds to honor their military dead. It was not a racist thing. It was not to glorify slavery. It simply honors the military leaders of the South, this one, and it should not be removed. Thank you.
Patricia Mason.
I did write on something, but I'm just gonna. I appreciate everybody coming together to have this discussion, a healthy discussion, and to be able to see both sides of this divisive issue. I am for the monument, actually, but not the location of it. It's a beautiful monument. It was constructed beautifully. It has amazing history, but to a certain group of people, it is offensive. I haven't had the luxury to travel to Germany, but I did go to New York and visit the Holocaust Museum. I'm not Jewish, but going through that and learning about what they went through and what actually happened, I felt something. And I know I have enough respect, enough decency not to wear a swastika or a Hitler shirt or anything like that in public, because it will offend Jewish people. So it's the symbolism of it. It's not removing it, it's not to remove history, because history is what it is. And we honor history by reading about it and sharing it and keeping it going. So we truly honor history by just learning from it, period. But if there's a symbol that is offensive to people, a certain group of people who have to go to a courthouse that represents justice, and to look at that symbol and what it represents, I mean, we all have our opinions and how we view things, but historically, when people were disenfranchised or lynched or hurt or intimidated, it was a tool of intimidation. And every massive lynching, it was a symbol of hate, and that was one of the symbols of hate that was there to reinforce that ideology. And I'm not against anyone standing for what they believe in. We all have that right. But for us to all be inclusive and be respectful and sensitive, just humanity, not a black or white issue, not even the Confederate in the Union, it's just decency. And if it's offensive, I would show that respect to my fellow citizen, and I do that, relocated in a place, revered in a different place, but not in a neutral location that every citizen has to walk by. That's all.
History is complicated. That monument is definitely a commemoration of those who sacrificed in the Civil War. And the men who put it up in the early 20th century would probably roll over in their graves if they heard me say it. But there were African Americans who fought for the Confederacy. There was one, and I'm sure some of these gentlemen up here can tell me the name. There was a man who was a slave and went with his owner into battle, served with him. When he was shot, he carried him to a medical facility.
Levi Carney.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's how it works. We do appreciate it.
And then when his owner died, he went back to that regiment to fight. And he served with another officer in that same regiment. And he's buried in a military cemetery in DeSoto Parish. So my point is, it's complicated. History is very complicated. I don't know what the intention was of putting it up there, if it was white supremacy. I'm sure for some it was. But again, it's complicated. The Civil War definitely was fought for slavery. If you don't know that, talk to Lincoln, because Lincoln said somehow slavery is the cause of this war. Whether we're talking economic, slavery was part of the economy. Whether we're talking about sectionalism, it was a part of this part of the country. It was cultural. It was political, the Three-Fifths Compromise. I mean, it's all through history. But again, history is complicated. I like having that monument there because it does provoke discussion. I don't want anybody offended by it. I am very glad they took down the Confederate flag. I thought that was very appropriate. I would love to see that monument remain where it is. And as others have said, another monument added to it. I would love to see a statue to a man by the name of Claude Underwood, who went off to World War II, served his country bravely, came home, tried to register to vote, had to take a white person to vouch for him, and this was in the days of the literacy test. He had to answer the question, how many bubbles are in a bar of Ivory soap? Of course, there's no answer. He was told he was incorrect, and he was sent away. He came back day after day and was asked the question again, and the answer changed every day. He kept doing it. He got his voting registration. He became a voter in Caddo. That happened at that courthouse. I'd like to see a statue to Mr. Underwood. Capitol in Washington has Statuary Hall. Let's have a statuary garden. There are a lot of people that need to be honored here. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Caleb Holmes, and as a part of the younger community, I've been in Shreveport since I was a baby, so this is all I know. This is home for me. And, you know, regardless of the passions and the emotions and the opinions, history is history. We can't change it. But we also have to realize what this monument actually stands for, and that it offends a huge segment of our population. And nobody out here is, talking about burning it or breaking it down. We want to put it in a place that is educationally and culturally appropriate for everybody, so that we can learn from history, so we don't repeat it, but we learn from it in the correct context. And that should not be in a neutral place in the halls of justice where we all have to go to see things changed in our beautiful parish. So it should be moved to a place, in a museum, in a park, something that tells the story of our country from day one till now and continue the story into the future. But for us to sit here and frankly deny is an act of intellectual dishonesty. The monument stands for a region of the country that left the United States for the sole reason of keeping people down and abusing their human rights, not U.S. rights, human rights. So let's all be intellectually honest here and move the monument to a safer place, of course, but also to make sure that we tell the story in an intellectually honest way. And so that way us and the younger generation, we can not only say, hey, we did something in Shreveport. We weren't last for once. We actually made a change and did something good, and we were ahead of the curve. So that's my opinion, and I would strongly advise the chair, consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Patty Underwood.
I want to thank you all for giving us this opportunity to come out and voice our opinions. I came out to voice my support for keeping the statue and keeping the statue where it is, where it was placed. I'd like to read to you all, I had written a letter, and I think that in the letter this presents my basis for my opinion pretty succinctly. There was a bill, House Bill 71, that was up recently to preserve the monuments in the state, and I had written a letter to all of the representatives, and so I'd like to read this to you. I am writing to ask you to please vote yes for HB 71 when it comes to the floor. I am a 2016 history graduate of Louisiana State University in Shreveport, where I studied under Dr. Gary Joyner, Dr. Cheryl White, and Dr. Alexander Mikaberidze. My forebears, my ancestors, have fought in the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Battle of New Orleans, the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. My children's paternal grandfather lost his life in the Korean War. Some members of my family gave their lives in defense of our country. The historic monuments have been lovingly created and placed to commemorate these truly consequential events and people by those who succeeded them, in order those who knew well their sacrifices and their valor, in order that they would never be forgotten. We cannot allow the capricious whims of political correctness and expedience to blot out respect for their witness. A statue of a general, for example, represents not only the individual depicted, but also every man or woman who fought under that individual. Every single monument must be protected. And I would like to add to that, that's my personal feeling from my personal family history. As a student of history, I would like to say that historians look, as we get farther and further from the time of these events and these people, we look back to the witness of the people of that time period. And if we move that statue, we will be altering the witness of the people who placed it there. I believe also that it would be immoral to do that, because we would be, the people who placed that statue there, this is their witness and their voice for the people that they knew who fought for them. And they won't have a chance to come back and refuse. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for staying late this evening. I appreciate y'all's dedication to hearing everyone's thoughts and opinions on this. And I'm sure we're all hungry and cold and ready to go.
Yes, I'm diabetic. No,
thank you for staying. I'll make it quick, I promise. All right, so tonight you've heard a lot of concerns about preserving history and remembering our ancestors, and which is important to remember our heritage, and we have to learn from our history so we can make informed decisions about our future. And that's what I'm here for tonight. Personally, I've got Confederate blood in me too. I'm related to John Wilkes Booth himself, but I don't go putting that on my resume. It's not something that I celebrate. It's not something I'm proud of. It's a part of my history, and that's where it needs to stay. But there are many other citizens of Caddo Parish whose ancestors are not being represented and respected and remembered as they should. And we need to remember that as well in making this decision. Just because they were family doesn't mean that they were right. Our Confederate ancestors were on the wrong side of history, and the fact that many people in the South refuse to acknowledge that fact is alarming. But it's not about history, it's about the future. It's about what are we teaching our children. On my card, I told you I'm here, and not solely to represent myself, but also a community that's very important to me. Teach in the Martin Luther King area, Cooper Road area, Caddo Parish. I just want to tell you a little bit about my February this year, teaching about desegregation to a room full of black students, and it's a very awkward position to be in, teaching children about this 50-plus-year-old policy when clearly that school has not been integrated, and our schools have not been integrated because our communities have not been integrated. Our communities have not been integrated because of poor economic development, gentrification, and all of these are problems that stem from this continued white supremacist ideology, which is celebrated in front of our courthouse. That's not the place for the monument. We do need to preserve history, as we do very well in a museum, where there can be additional literature on the subject where people can see that history in its proper context. But celebrating that in front of a place of justice is not appropriate. It sends the wrong message to future generations. And I hope that we will set a good example for them and allow our upcoming youth to feel included in the American dream and in our struggle for racial equality here in the museum.
Thank you. Kathy Ragsdale.
Good evening, thank you for your time. I'll try and be brief. To be clear, I was born and raised in Shreveport. I grew up in Broadmoor. I'm now a homeowner here. I lived here my whole life, except for when I was in the military and after at LSU. I have ancestors that fought and died in the Confederacy. Like probably many of you, I was raised on the notion that the Civil War was fought for states' rights. But the time has come to set things straight and acknowledge that slavery was the principal state right in question. It had a major role in the Confederacy and more fundamentally our society. While it's true minority-owned slave, the institution of slavery required the widespread cultural belief of white supremacy to function. In the years after the war, lynching and murder were a deadly serious threat to the black community. It's been over 150 years since the Civil War. If we ever truly have reconciliation, let us finally speak honestly. In fact, the same day in 1903, the police jury voted to allow the UDC, Daughters of the Confederacy, to build this monument. The Shreveport Times published an article defending the lynching and saying that burning of the stake was an acceptable method to do so. It must be noted that there were so many murders and lynchings in Caddo Parish that it earned the moniker of Bloody Caddo. In light of that past, I don't think it's unreasonable for black people or anyone to see that monument as a symbol of injustice. The fundamental issue for me is that perceived symbol of injustice is in front of a courthouse, which is supposed to be a symbolic house of justice. That is a major contradiction. Either the monument needs to move or the courthouse needs to. As it stands today, this monument is corrosive to the expectation of equal justice. There is a popular myth in Shreveport that the daughters own the plot of land. If you look back at the police jury minutes in 1903, it simply states that they reserved that land for a monument. The UDC doesn't have a clear title of the land. Honestly, if anyone else claimed ownership of land without a title, would you take them seriously? And I challenge the daughters to produce that title. I'm not here to shame or guilt anyone. I'm here because I've got children, and I owe this to them. We've come a long way since slavery, but our work isn't over. I'm here tonight to say it's long past time to move this monument to a museum, Civil War battle site, or cemetery. I'm not saying destroy it. I'm saying move it someplace. This won't solve all our problems, I'll agree. It won't end public corruption. It won't end wasteful city It won't end wasteful city and parish spending, or fix our schools or criminal justice system. But this is at least a simple symbolic step that we as a people can take forward. And on a side note, I don't see why there can't be private funding for this. I'd be happy to set up a GoFundMe account for the parish and personally donate to it. I feel the need to speak today because we all have a moral obligation towards justice and reconciliation. And I hope you sign our petition and join us. Thank you for your time, and I'm proud to live in America in a place where we can speak freely.
Thank you, sir. James Gardner.
Department Secretary.
Your 3 minutes started 10 seconds.
Howdy. My name is Benjamin Arnold, and I care a great deal about this issue because I love the city, and I love the state of Louisiana. I love the South. I grew up with a great deal of pride. I grew up being told that I was related to Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, and I've never verified that, so don't quote me on it. But in evaluating the Civil War and such, every person in this room will probably have a different idea as to why the war was fought, what the objectives were, what the beliefs were and such. So we are not going to come to a consensus on the path. It's just not going to happen. So the committee is going to be in a position of really upsetting one side or the other. So I encourage y'all to consider, instead of the historical issues, consider what was in common, the common foundation, and that was economic hardship. We see it today. It exists among blacks and whites alike, and the same was true at the time of the memorial. When the memorial was built, there were still veterans from the Civil War alive. They were still walking the streets. I mean, they were only 40 years removed. So they wanted to give them a memorial that inspired unity, or gave them boosted morale. And so we need that today. We need that same commonality, because there are more things in common that we can unite on than just the memorial. And I would like to read Jefferson Davis, my Uncle Jeff's, last documented speech before he died in 1888. This is Mississippi. I won't read the whole thing, but he says, "My ambition lies buried in the grave of the Confederacy. There has been consigned not only my ambition, but the dogmas upon which that government was based. The faces I see before me are those of young men and women. Had I not known this, I would not have appeared before you. Men in whose hands the destinies of the Southland lie. For love of her, I break my silence to let it bury the dead, its hopes and its aspirations. Before you lies the future, a future full of golden promise, a future of expanding national glory, before which all the world shall stand amazed. Let me beseech you to lay aside all rancor." He's saying, just chill out.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Your time has expired.
A reunited country, he implored us for. Thank you.
Opportunity. My name is Timothy Hunter. First of all, I want to say I love everybody. So I would not come with a racial bent to this. I think you'll agree that for most of us, the Bible speaks to the conscience of most of us, to our human conscience. If you be honest, the Bible makes a communication that as you would men do unto you, you do also unto them. Now the truth is, we've all done things to other folks that we're not proud of. But you don't celebrate the wrong. You don't celebrate immorality. You don't celebrate a time when people were abused just for their labor. You don't celebrate that by erecting a statue. That's just not humane. So we learn to change things as we grow in time. We change laws to reflect our change of mind. We change legislations. When it was Jim Crow at one time, when you were black, go to the back of the bus, go to a white water fountain, so to speak, black water fountains. And well, when you change your mind, you change laws and you change legislation to reflect that. Well, in a similar way, our landscape could also reflect that change. Now, I've heard good talk on both sides. I got the point on both sides. But I think that there's a place for the monument. But we're not being honest as individuals. It was a time that statue, when it was built, we had no say in the matter. And you know, if you were on the side of the oppressed and the abused, you'll be offended at that monument. So there's a place for it, but it surely ought not be on the steps of the courthouse. Now, again, I love everybody, but the basis of that statue was white supremacy. The bottom line, you can hide behind words of heritage and honor and you can do that. But if you are honest with yourselves, you know that you would not be okay if the murderers of your ancestors were celebrated. You understand that you were raised in a certain culture and understand, but I'm saying as you become more enlightened, I was taught as a young boy, when you know better, do better. And it ought to reflect not only in our law, but it ought also reflect in our landscape. So I think the courthouse is a place where it ought not to be. I think there's a place for it. And the bottom line is this. I think that nobody ought to not consider the other person's feelings. I'm black. I don't say because you're white that I don't like it. No, I'm just saying put yourself in my shoes. I'm gonna put myself in your shoes. And I guarantee you, at the end of the day, you wouldn't say, let's just...
Thank you, Mr. Hunt.
Okay.
Lauren Thibodeau.
Hello, I'm Lauren Thibodeau. Thank you for having us here and listening. I propose that we replace this monument with one that celebrates something we agree on, one that unites us. We could have a monument that lists veterans from Caddo Parish from various wars that would unite our citizens and not offend certain people who enter our courthouse and desire justice. I've seen this on Mackinac Island in Michigan, and it was very interesting to read the list of veterans from their community that they were honoring. We could also have a monument for those from Caddo Parish who served in the civil rights movement. I'm sure private citizens would pay for this. Where there's a will, there's a way. If private citizens would like to take the current monument and erect it somewhere else in the area, that would be fine in my opinion too, but in front of the courthouse is not the appropriate spot. The statue was erected in 1906 during the Jim Crow law era. It celebrates what the Confederacy stood for. Yes, the Civil War was fought for states' rights, the economy, etc., but in the end, the fact that the North won is why slavery ended. People are saying taking the statue down is trying to revise history. However, I see it as standing that we're trying to revise history. Usually those who lose wars are not celebrated. When I lived in Albania, statues of Lenin and Stalin were behind the National Museum, not on display, because Albania is no longer a communist country. Louisiana is no longer a part of the Confederacy. People have said that taking the statue down will change history. People in Germany don't name children Adolf or have statues of Nazis, but it doesn't change their history. We all saw Saddam Hussein statues come down in Iraq, but it didn't change the history that had already happened. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Wyatt Murphy.
My name is Mary Walker. I'm standing here today to say I support the Confederate monument, stating where it was placed in 1903 by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. The plot of land where the monument stands belongs to the UDC, and the monument itself was built and paid for with funds raised by the UDC. This monument is a memorial for all the Confederate soldiers who gave the ultimate sacrifice for their beliefs. Approximately 260,000 Confederate soldiers died on the battlefields during the Civil War. Most of those bodies were left on the ground where they died, or they were buried in shallow graves at the battle site. At least half the dead of the Civil War were never identified. Families were left without knowing what happened to their loved ones. They didn't have bodies to bury and mourn. President Lincoln had the dead Union soldiers' bodies dug up for burial in national cemeteries, but the bodies of the soldiers wearing gray were ordered to be left in the ground where they lay. Thank God, a constellation of ladies' memorial associations were established to provide dignity for the Confederate dead whose remains were rotten in the battlefields. These women also raised their own funds to build hundreds of monuments and statues across the country so their loved ones would never be forgotten and there would be a place for families to mourn when they had no grave to go to. It is considered hallowed ground to those people. There were only 6 Confederate monuments in Louisiana. We just witnessed the removal of 4 in New Orleans. There are only 2 left. One is ours by the courthouse, and one is in Clinton, Louisiana by their courthouse. There is a bill that will protect the Confederate monuments, House Bill 71, which has already passed the House with a 65-31 vote. It is now in the hands of the Senate. Is it fair that this bill will pass that cause New Orleans to rush to the removal of their monuments? My question is, why is there so much animosity towards our Confederate monuments? They were built out of love and loss for our veterans during wartime, so we would never forget their sacrifice. Will the animosity continue until all memories of the Confederacy are torn down? And what will be targeted next? Will we remove the monuments of all our past presidents who owned slaves? There were a total of 12 presidents who owned slaves, including George Washington, who owned 317, and Thomas Jefferson, who owned 200. Even Ulysses Grant and his wife owned 5 slaves. I mention this only because I'm worried our country will never move past this anger. The Confederate monument was built out of love and in memory of fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands who died during the Civil War. It is a memory of our veterans who gave their lives just like any other war. My prayer is that understanding and compassion will result from these meetings. Please do not remove a part of our history. I want my children and my grandchildren to remember the sacrifice of all our veterans and to never forget my great-great-grandfathers who fought for both the North and the South during the Civil War. I am proud to be an American, and I'm also proud to be a daughter of the Confederacy. I speak this evening in the memory of my great-great-grandfather, Captain James Elgin Reese, 5th Alabama Battalion, Company C, White Plains Rangers, who fought from September 1861 until the end of the war. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Vicki Pulley.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am for the removal of the Confederate monuments. Removing the Confederate monuments from front of the courthouse will be about showing the whole world that we as a city and as a people are able to learn from our mistakes. Choose a better future for ourselves and make right what was wrong. If we don't, we continue to pay the price for injustice, division, and violence. The appeal case, the state of Louisiana versus Felton Dorson by Mr. Carl Staples, reached the Supreme Court, citing the Confederate flag and the Caddo monuments as cause for unjust verdict of Mr. Dorsey's murder trial. In that eminence brief by the ACLU, it gave a terrifying visual of the history that happened in Bloody Caddo, for being the most violent area in Louisiana and the last in the Confederacy, where consequences of having the Confederate flag and monuments placed at the courthouse led to the concerted effort to cleanse African Americans from this area, first physically by assaulting and murdering them, and then legally by disenfranchising them and ensuring they would live in poverty. But the most obvious of them all is the monument people of color have to walk past to go to a place that's supposed to be a place of justice for all, when in fact it hasn't and never will be as long as those monuments stand. When African Americans were given the right to vote in Louisiana after the Civil War, they were outnumbered whites in population and eligible voters. During the period from 1868 to 1874, white citizens in Caddo Parish refused to accept the Confederates' loss of the Civil War, displacement of their electoral control, and other reconstitutional reforms, and reacted with violence, intimidation, and mass murder. For me, it's not just about the monument, but where it is. It being on the front lawn of the Caddo Courthouse is the problem. It will be best served for everyone involved to, yes, treat the monument with the respect that those who hold it, though it's an embarrassment to me. Carefully find a place to install it, whether it be the Confederate graveyard, or do what New Orleans did and sell it to the highest bidder to offset the cost to remove it. But for it to remain where it is will only reflect on Caddo Parish sins against all people of color who seek injustice in that courthouse, to seek justice in that courthouse. Please be very clear about this. Those that are making this decision, you will be seen as apologists to the Confederacy and the cult of lost causes if you decide to not remove it.
Thank you, ma'am.
My name is Ken Myers, and what I was listening to tonight, there's a lot of different opinions about what's going on. Mr. York can verify that history has been distorted. I was looking at it in a 1900 history book today that I found. I read others. And their approach of history back then and their attitudes were a whole lot different than what we're teaching students. Listen to these young students, what they're got. I'm in favor of leaving the statue where it's at, but I think maybe it might be more appropriate to move the courthouse. There's a lot of history in that courthouse. We have an old federal building sitting down there. They have to be more reflective of a modern Caddo Parish. One lady made mention of all the hanging tree down there. We have Confederate group reunion that happened on that. And then nowhere in Caddo Parish are you going to find a place to put a Confederate statue. It will fall apart if you try to move it. And it may be just making it a museum highlighting Caddo Parish history. You can put all the monuments you want, honoring everybody on that one spot. It'd be in line with the sideboard, it'd be in line with the culture center, the art center. We would just have a museum district. And we could have a new courthouse over there, which I'm quite sure they'd be ready to get rid of, but they can't ever use it on the school that owns it. And that we can move forward. The people who feel like they have injustice walking by that statue would no longer have to walk by it. But they also might have a place to tell their story inside the courthouse. Because, as I said, there is no place in Caddo Parish that highlights Caddo Parish history or anything that we have to offer. So that's my opinion.
Thank you. Tony Alexander, Spam. Okay, Mr. Perkins.
I'm John Perkins. I spoke last week, and I had hoped that the monument could stay there and be used as a tourist attraction by artists moving that monument through history and interpreting it and doing something like Christo does, and wrapping it in fabric, and then we could do something different. But now I'm hearing, I've actually learned from Dr. Joyner and Mr. Prime that there's an actual historic Civil War fort in Allendale that has been described, I think, by you gentlemen as the best example of a historic Civil War site in Shreveport, Louisiana, and yet the government would like to build a highway over that fort. And to see people fighting over this monument, as divisive as it is, it brought to mind the 1968 story of Uncle Jack, the good darky in Natchitoches, Louisiana. And what a terribly divisive thing was. It got so divisive that bomb threats actually moved it out of Natchitoches in '68. And there was one group of folks that were like, we love that statue. Another group that said, we hate the statue, it's got to go. And it came to that. And I see that same sort of energy here. I think we can find a more creative thing that we could do with that monument that honors it for the folks that honor it and moves it into perspective. What if it went to that Civil War site in Allendale and created a tourist spot instead of a highway in Allendale? What if it joined Uncle Jack in Baton Rouge in a museum setting, the good darky, and went down there where it could be? What if it was sold? I really believe the monument has to go now, and that's a new opinion from me. I'm saddened to see this divisiveness, and I agree. My family told me one story. I've met other families that have a different story of being abused throughout history. And when they see that, an artist could put lipstick on it, it would still remind them of centuries of abuse under that monument and what it stands for. It's got to move somewhere else, and it belongs on a historic Civil War site. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Last call for the opinion, but did not wish to speak. Carl McDaniel. Mr. McDaniel would like to see it moved. Tanisha Morris. Ms. Morris would like to take it down. Debbie Walker. Do not wish to speak. but the Confederate monument should remain. David Hill, leave history alone. Kathleen Pittman, remove the statue. Trevon Brown, the statue, remove it. Jessica Plater, remove the monument. Mr. Calhoun, if we're gonna have a conversation, Mr. Calhoun.
I understand you're trying to
Mr. Calhoun, we're gonna take care of you. If you would have a seat, be respectful. We're gonna follow the process.
respect us also.
We are respecting you,
No, you're not.
sir. If you would let me read
You're
this.
denying.
I haven't said you could not speak.
Did
I address you at all?
What you said?
Sir.
This man just said what you
I have
said.
not addressed you at all, and I am the chair of this committee. So when I address you and state that, we will take care of what we need to take care of. Irene Foster, leave the statue where it is. Susan Trahan. Committee members, if there's no objection, we're gonna forgo the reading of these, we're gonna place these into the record as they stand.
Read them all. Please read them all. I mean, it's very simple. Keep, no, keep.
Okay, I have no objection to that. Committee members, do you guys have any objection? Okay.